I was going to try and take you back to just the very beginning, because that was the same week that the comic strip started, and I just wondered if you was there any sense at that time that there was something revolutionary happening, or was it all just another job?
It was the first job.
I think there was a sense that it was alternative comedy the so-called alternative had just come in, just arriving, and it was clearly something different from what had been before. And there was a buzz around town. There was the Comedy Store had opened. There were a few other little gigs going on, and I remember going as a punter. I'd never produced or directed anything. I was just a kid, but I was just beginning to move up the BBC, and I went just as a punter one night to watch this Comedy Store thing that everybody was talking about. And the Comedy Store was just off Wardour Street. And about 15 years before that, just off Wardour Street, was a club called the Marquee Club, where the 60s music explosion had happened, and I've been lucky enough to go there as a kid. And I remember thinking, coming out of that, this is the same thing. It's not going to be internationally big like that, but this is something, when you went and watched Man for Man or Georgie Fame or the Yardbirds or whatever, you thought, this is completely different. This is going to be really exciting. And then when you went and saw this stuff, I thought, this is amazing. And really, that's how I sold Boom Boom in the first place. Because these guys, it was your first gig.
Paul was really the only producer from the BBC who took an interest in so-called alternative comedy, because television was pretty much in the grips of sort of Oxbridge, Footlights, sketch shows, and
or traditional variety,
or traditional variety, and you did the Two Ronnies, didn't you? And
I was working on the Two Ronnies, yeah.
And
I didn't go and see it as a professional thing. I went to see it because I liked comedy.
But it seemed to me that there was a you mentioned the music, but there was a sort of punk ethic about it as well. It was sort of punk, let's put the whole show on here. It was that sort of thing.
Some of that's an illusion, though, isn't it? Because I always think that was, when we had the bands on, they were I remember Rip Rig and Panic going, "Oh, this drink's real. Let's fucking drink it." And I'm like, "No, it's prop. We need it for continuity. Don't drink it." And I realised at that point that the musicians were punky, but we weren't really. That we were.
Well, your big moment of non-punkiness when we told Alexei that Hugh and Stephen and Emma and Mel and Griff were going to be in it, I think he nearly walked out the door.
No, you didn't tell me. I just turned up the day before, found them.
Who's in
what
it?
are they doing?
Yeah, these are the enemy. Yeah.
But I think Alexei's right. There was an artifice in trying to make it, because you're in television, that's the medium. You have to use the medium you're in. So there was a certain artifice in making it look punky. It was a deliberate choice.
But
for instance, the special effects. We didn't use, at that time, high-tech special effects we could have used. We used crap puppets instead.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to be quite as crap
No.
as they were. That was unintentional.
They turned out crapper than we thought.
Yes. It does add to the allure, though.
In the second series, we changed puppeteers, and the puppets...
We changed puppeteers and they got better. But Adrian hates the puppets, as always to this day. It will say, I don't know why the fuck... on the UK TV thing, he said, why did you have the fucking puppets in? What was that about? You had 4 very funny people and you wasted your time on puppets.
He had SPG, didn't he?
Yeah.
SPG,
Yeah. Can I talk to you a little about how you built up the characters? Because, Lisa, presumably, you and Rick were already working on Rick's character, as the poet,
Rick's
people's
character
poet.
already existed. Neil already existed as a sort of bobble hat wearing, very depressed guitar player.
That's what you saw when you went to the Comedy Store. You saw those 2 characters fully formed. And Lexi, really.
And you saw Adrian's character in the Dangerous Brothers with Rick, and in a way you saw the Mike character in
Peter Richardson.
Peter Richardson.
But more in Peter's real character than anything.
Mike was
real
Peter,
character.
but Peter couldn't play.
But so the characters already existed. They went through a development. I think when you put them all in a house with a landlord and say they're going to be students now. They notch up a thing and they go beyond just being a bobble-hatted.
They had to have a relationship with each other, which
yeah,
they hadn't
so
had
that's
before.
when they go through a strainer, as it were, and become more refined. but all the characters did exist. You
And
know,
it
some
was-
years before the
It was
TV
specifically
show.
written for specific actors and specific characters that those
Did you have any?
actors had.
I mean, because when you came to me, I being the young prick that I was, I said like, "Yeah, I don't want to be like a single character like you guys, because that's okay for you, but I want to be like just like a multiplicity of characters." I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
and
because we
they
decided
bought that, didn't
that
they?
Yeah.
we were going-
And then he
no.
played the same character all the way through, all
Yeah.
along.
Just with different names.
Different name.
I thought it was. I thought I was acting.
I know you did, Lex. That was the funny part about it.
But when I said that to you,
Well,
I
we
don't know
said
about you.
you're the landlord, and you said I don't want to just be the landlord, and we
Right.
went when
You
you
did.
can be his extended family.
And in the second series,
And the
you played a
train
revolutionary, didn't
driver.
you? A South American revolutionary.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
you
all
did.
kinds. Well, that's the
They
thing. I
got to
said I
different
didn't
things.
want to be the landlord.
Exactly.
So you originally thought of me as the landlord.
Yeah.
Originally, 20th Century Coyote and Outer Limits, who were working the circuit together, the two double acts, had this, I don't know who had the idea of, let's put them all together in a student house. That's where the...
Rick
Well,
and
there's-
I did.
Rick,
Yeah,
Rick
the
had that
student
idea,
house
and-
was their
and
idea.
then Alexei was clearly the big star of the Comedy Store and the one everybody came to see. And he compared it all. He was. And they came to
didn't
see,
last,
and so they said, we've got to have Alexei in it. Well, obviously, he'd be good for the landlord. That's how it started.
But does that mean that because you knew your characters so well, the characters that you either created or worked on, does that mean that you did your own parts and then filtered
do you
it
mean
through
by
a script?
did?
Well, I mean, does that mean that your dialogue, for instance, would it have been...
No, there was
no,
written
right.
scripts with Ben Elton.
Very,
Lisa and Rick and Ben
very
Elton.
specifically written, and they didn't
Yeah.
improvise. They
No,
didn't.
we didn't have time to improvise. You know that in those days it was really heavily unionised. At 10 o'clock, you'd be in studio knowing that the plug was
plugs,
going to go. At about 9:45, Paul would be calling down to the basement, going, "Please, please, can we have an extension?" And then it was up to them whether they gave us an extra 15 minutes or something.
But they actually liked the show, so they quite often did give us an
Yeah.
extra 15 minutes, which was very unusual at the time. They didn't like giving you extra time.
And also you're editing on video, so you couldn't keep fiddling around with it because you couldn't keep going down generations. So it was very much kind of what you got in the studio.
It was shot on
the
2-inch,
night.
you know, the big
Yeah.
2-inch
Well,
tapes.
Well, you had the week in rehearsal. If there was going to be any creative improvisation or whatever, it would all be worked
Yeah.
out in a rehearsal.
And
So
we-
it's not
we
like
had-
filming where you turn up and do it. You've got a week's rehearsal. You mess the script around, do whatever you're going to do then. But once you're in the studio, it's pretty much you've got to deliver what was planned.
To be fair, we should be clear that Rick, Lisa and Ben wrote these scripts, because I think people do think, oh, they all knew the characters. They just go, that's not true. They wrote the scripts. Lexi always had additional material credit, as you saw just now, and he came in, he always said,
Paid for my house.
I'll do 5 minutes. And he came in on about a Thursday. We used to rehearse Monday to
my
Friday,
kids
and we
through
shot
college.
Saturday, Sunday. He'd come in on about a Thursday, and everybody would be terrified because Lexi's coming in to do his bit.
Used to be just a hole. I mean, have I hallucinated this? Did there used to be just a hole in the script?
Yes, it said
Yeah.
Alexi section. And he'd come in, and some weeks he'd
There
done it, some weeks he
originally
hadn't.
there were monologues that Ben had put together. Like yes, I remember reading monologues.
No, he
Here's a Lexi monologue,
He just said Lexi monologue.
No, and
Yeah, it was
but
just a-
sometimes,
he
like
came-
which
when
you ignored.
When you were
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
If
yeah.
you were
No, I'm not saying you did Ben's monologue. I'm saying there was something in the script. Ben had put together some lines like your
To give
material.
an idea,
But
just
if-
to give a
if it
flavour,
was-
and then he
Yeah.
did.
It had
if,
to have a,
if he was Tommy Bolofsky or something,
it
we
had a
would script
thing
it,
in the plot, yeah.
and it was part
So
of
we'd
it.
phone him up and
If
say-
it was Dr. Martin's Boots, it would
Yes.
be,
In-
you know, the bit of dialogue with Rick and Neil would be written,
Yeah.
and then the bit that you did would be a whole. That's what it was.
Good. Well, I'm glad. I can't remember. So. Good.
I am sitcoms at that time. Filmed in studio sitcoms were filmed as live because everybody hated editing videotape.
As near
It
as
was
you could,
almost
yeah,
impossible. But with a show like that, with so much violent slapstick mayhem, explosions and things being pulled down, obviously costumes getting ruined, was that possible, or did you have to just get it right first time?
Well, I think there were two things. Firstly, and it's a well-known story, but just say it again. The reason the music is not only in it, but stayed in it. In the first episode, they wanted everything in. The guy said, look, we want everything. Let's have variety shows. So we had fire eaters, we had lions, we had underwater scuba divers outside the window. I mean, we had everything we could think of. And, of course, we had the mysterious fifth character who sat around in the first series. So we had everything. And then after that, we decided it was a bit too much, really, and it wasn't adding much. And famously, as Lisa and I were just talking, the bloody chip and the carrot thing, that took about 3 hours to film for that 5 seconds of not particularly relevant.
3 very precious hours.
It was very, because you had to literally, I mean, we had no CGI. They were literally skating, two skaters on far off in the studio on a bloody skating ring with CSO onto, I mean, it was ludicrous. It took 3-4 hours to get that thing. And we all looked at each other and said, okay, let's not do any more of that. But even then, we still had a band in, because by having a band in, we came out of the variety department, and the variety shows, Two Ronnies, Morecambe and Wise and so on, used to get 2 days in the studio and more money. I mean, we never knew how much money because the BBC didn't tell you at the time, but bigger budgets, 2 days in the studio. A standard sitcom had 1 day in the studio and very outside filming on things like Dad's Army, but not necessarily. So we had a much bigger canvas. So what we used to do was we used to shoot and even when you did a bit of pre-recording on those 2 days, you'd maybe do 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 4 o'clock on the Saturday. We used to go in at 10 o'clock on the Saturday, shoot the arse off it for 12 hours, come in again on Sunday morning and shoot stuff. And then we'd only start rehearsing the show after lunch on Sunday normally, dress run it and do it. So we squeezed every little bit.
And there were bits like, I can remember the bit when he's, you know, the pickaxe goes through his head, or he's stuck on the back of the door, where you would film the most difficult bit of the special effect on the pre-day. Yeah. Then we'd run it in, so we'd go live, and literally at that point we'd all go quiet in the dark. The special effect that was filmed the previous day would come up on the screens, and then back into the live action.
But we
and
did that
you got really good at doing
possible.
that. Yeah,
some of the
as
big
little as
stunts
possible.
we did, like in the famous
some of the
stunt
big
where
stunts, though,
Rick
you
and
had
Ada
to.
fighting in the bed, and they fall through the bed. That was done live in front of the studio audience.
Yes, stupidly.
Stupidly. You couldn't
You could have broken both their ankles.
No, you couldn't do that stuff anymore because you just
Or
wouldn't
the
be allowed.
explosion,
But in
yeah.
the studio, people were like, oh. And the explosion, of course, famously, they loaded the visual effects boys loaded it twice. Two of them loaded it not knowing that the other one had. That's why it goes off. So it went off much bigger than we
It's the
thought.
only time we go into slow-mo or anything high-tech, isn't it?
The camera caught fire.
Oh, yeah, the camera. I mean, it was a complete explosion, and they were brilliant. These guys, they carried on. They didn't stop. They carried on, and then we looked at it in the
quite
edit.
a few injuries, weren't there?
So we slowed it down. Yeah.
I mean,
that really is the difference between. I mean, it was dangerous, wasn't it? Doing that show was. Yeah, I mean, genuinely, without.
Well, when you're chopping the door down in
Yeah.
another episodes with Rick's head's right, and it was a proper axe. It wasn't a rubber axe. He's doing The Shining, and Rick's got his head by the door. When you look at it now, it's
Well, even the first episode when
The brick.
Abe bites the brick, which was Rivita,
Oh, that was
with
it's
muesli
Rivita
inside
stuck in a
it.
brick.
Explosive.
With an air pump.
And it just blew up in his face.
so did anyone get hurt?
Well, I tell you, the nearest.
Went to hospital.
Rick got burnt once with the fire engine, but I tell you, the nearest wasn't on this show. It was on the Dangerous Brothers on Saturday Live. After this, the Dangerous Brothers did an insert every week on Saturday Live, and they did one called The Towering Inferno. They reenacted The Towering Inferno, and Sir Adrian Dangerous was on a chair, and Rick poured petrol all over him, and what he had basically was fire gel on his trousers, and set him on fire. So that was now Sir Adrian. Towering Inferno, and he set him on fire. And Aid had, I can't remember, there was a code word for if he was
A safe word.
Safe word, yeah.
The thing went up so quickly that he couldn't get it out. So he very sensibly, he realised, so he lay on his side, so the flames went away from his face. But he lost his eyebrows, his hair, nose. I mean, it was really stupid, to be honest. But
He actually set himself on fire, and there's one where he's throwing a Molotov cocktail.
Yes,
and
that's it.
went
And he
Oh,
set the
yeah,
bed
I've
on
seen
fire.
that in the
Set the bed on fire.
outtakes thing.
And I cut Rick's head open with the butt of the shotgun that time, even though it was
Yes,
like a
that's
rubber
right.
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was that we wouldn't be allowed to do it.
No, I think the worst injury, you know, from my point of view, was the 6 foot of Claire falling on my head. I mean,
You've had.
People say
I had to go to the osteopath and
Nigel
explain.
went to the
Yeah,
hospital quite a lot. People
Never heard the end of that.
say
fucking
to you, how do you do it? How did you do that trick? We said, well, we just dropped an claw on his head. didn't we?"
Yes, without telling him.
Nigel spent quite a lot of time in the
In the
various alternative
osteopath.
doctors
Yeah,
around
that's
the
right.
set.
That's right.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. If they made it now, it would have to be animation.
Oh, well, you'd do a wipe, wouldn't you? We dropped a huge sandwich on Dawn French. Remember one of the episodes? And they said, how did you do it? Did you have a wipe? Which is what you do now. You'd just have a progressive wipe down to follow the sandwich down. No, we just dropped a thing.
Just sandwich.
And we were really fortunate to have this, that the BBC had a
Yes,
huge special effects
yeah,
department
yeah.
with all these amazing special effects people, and you turn up, you'd go. We had extra rehearsal days, didn't we? We had extra long rehearsal, and you'd have the read through and then work through the week. And that sometimes the night before the show, we'd go, "Oh, can you make us, a sofa that turns into a coffin, or a giant eclair
They
that
were
falls from the
brilliant, those
ceiling?"
guys.
And they would come up with this stuff. And I think we had 9 special effects
We had
people.
it was never heard of before. We had the cute Johnny Brace you saw there, and then Dave Barton, his assistant, took over in series 2. And Dave Barton was famously when Adrian has his head knocked off, when Vivian has his head knocked off, and then his body kicks it down the track. That's actually Dave Barton playing Vivian, and Vivian actually buried in the ground.
Yeah.
And then he kicks his head, and that's Dave, because Dave had a brilliant ability to do that with his neck, and you couldn't see his neck. He could bend his head further forward than most people. So he wore the
Well, there was this building in North Acton. You
Yeah,
go in,
yeah.
and they
You
were
go
just
over there.
full of people, sort of blowing things up and smashing bottles over each
They
other's
loved it,
heads
by the way.
and-
They absolutely loved it.
Special effects guys, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we can do it, Paul. Don't worry, we'll do it. It's all right. We'll work it out.
And then the sound effects guys, because all the sort of blows and everything
Yes,
were done
what was
live
his
in the
name?
studio.
Laurie Taylor was the sound suit, but there was the Gramop was called Jem Whippy.
And they would just time it exactly.
You know the oil bit where he's banging him on the head with the bat? That was actually, again, because we tried to make it for the audience, the Gramop played that in spot, because what you do now is you dub it on afterwards, because why would you even try? But it was more primitive then. It was quite difficult to dub it on afterwards. And anyway, we wanted to look good in the studio. So Jem said, no, I can do it in the thing. So, and he was so good at it that when Aid was bored in that episode, he'd just suddenly turn around and go like that. And
To see if he could catch him.
To see if he could catch him. Jem realised what he was doing. He got it every single time. He'd walk round. Jem Whippy.
I'm going to throw it out to questions from the audience in a minute, but I've got a couple. First of all, Lisa, I was just going to ask you, because of the, if you like, the new wave or this new wave of comedy philosophy, what were you, unlike you would have been 10 years earlier, but, having a girl on the team would have been odd. Not in the States, of course, where they would have some.
objected to it very heavily. We said she couldn't be in the
But
room.
there was no sense of being part of a boys' club.
No, not really, no. When you went to the bar at the BBC, then it was very much like, try and get a drink without having your bottom pinched 15 times. But
You had a
not-
very nice bottom. I know I'm not allowed to say that. I'm sorry. I know, but I'm very old and I don't work in the business anymore.
And then it happened.
That's if you could get into the bar at the
Yeah.
BBC,
To be
because they
fair,
were very strict
They were
about
very
letting
strict.
people
Yeah,
in,
they
weren't
didn't
they?
let you in. No wonder.
No.
That was one of the challenges, wasn't it? Was trying to get in the
Trying to
fucking
get in the
bar.
bar.
Trying to
You
get
had
in
to
the
be a member
BBC
of the
Absolutely
club.
recording,
and,
yeah.
The actors weren't members of the club. But it was quite for the time, comparatively, because it wasn't only Lisa. There was people like Maggie Steed and Pauline
Yeah.
Melville who you saw there, Helen Lederer, Jenny LeCote. There were
Yeah, it was emerging. Was it
They were
emerging?
on the
And
set.
Dawn and Jennifer.
And Dawn and Jennifer,
Yeah.
of course. And they were in the show. And you don't argue with people like Pauline and Maggie, believe me. They hold the room.
Sure.
So it was less male-orientated than probably most of the other shows, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there were women on the crew.
The women
I
on the
think. There
crew.
was-
Yeah.
Right. The other thing I wanted to do, you alluded to it, but it was just the fifth flat member, the ghostly fifth member. Did you know about this, Lisa? That there was.
She wrote it.
Oh, you did. You wrote it in, yeah.
The idea
You
was
noticed that, Lisa?
the idea was that this was a student house, and at some point in the past there'd been a party, and someone had just never gone home from the party. And people always think it's me because it's a woman with long brown hair who sort of sits there like that.
I can't remember her
But-
name, Lisa. Do you remember her name?
She was
She
very
was an extra.
annoying, wasn't she? I just remember that.
I never noticed.
But
How do you know she's not in the audience?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, for all the times
If it's you, put
for
up
all
your
the times
hand.
we've done this, have you ever met her? Have you ever?
No.
I've never had anybody come forward and say that was me. Or
Well, they wouldn't now, would they, after what you just said? They keep very quiet about it.
So, any questions, please? Just put your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you. Yes, question right on the right there. Thank you.
Can I just say before, but we were, I mean, it was one of the things I really admired about Paul, because we just thought, yeah, we're brilliant and we'll get it on the television, because we're fantastic. And now Paul will describe the tremendous lengths he had to go
Yeah,
to.
it was like the proverbial, duck swimming along on the top and the legs are going crazy under the water, which we didn't see so much of the hard work he was
at all,
doing.
no.
Well, you're really nice. That's really nice, actually, because it is nice.
We're nice people.
We met. You are nice. No, you are nice.
We weren't there.
Do you know what? It's
We
so
weren't, no.
lovely 30 years later to come back.
Yeah,
and
we're
see
nice to
people.
each other now.
Yeah, you're nice now.
Now all the hormones have died down.
Look, there was a whole story about why we did Boom Boom, but we're doing that next week, Dick,
Yeah.
so we'll leave that to then. That was in itself strange that show ever got made. And then after doing Boom Boom, Rick and Lisa came to me and said, look, we've got this script. Will you do it? And I can't really remember why. There'd been a little bit of buzz about Boom Boom, which, by the way, got one of the worst audience ratings ever until I did another series called Maurice Minor's Marvellous Motors, which got even less critical approval. But anyway, but there was a buzz about it, and there were people writing in sort of stand Time Out had just come out, and that kind of youth culture was beginning to get written about, and nosing around was obviously the Oxford Roadshow, and all that was sort of getting talked about. And so they thought, we've got, they didn't have proper budgets. Just
And
do the
Channel 4
pilot.
was gonna open.
Well, do a pilot, Paul. So we went and did this pilot. Robin Nash was the head of Variety that I made it for. And I gave him the pilot. And there's lots of stories. But anyway, I gave him the pilot. And he said to me on a videotape, and next morning he said to me, look, it happens, Paul, it happens. I mean, it's a good try. And John Howard Davis, who was the head of comedy, had apparently said to him, they both watched it together, said to him, I've got worse flops in the vaults, Robin, don't worry about it. It happens. So they were like saying to me, look, nice try, lad, but... And that was the end of it. And then I showed it at a conference, an internal BBC conference, which was talking about youth television, because suddenly this was the big thing. And Channel 4 was just coming down the road, and I showed it, and a colleague of mine called Mike Bolland, about 3 weeks later, absconded to Channel 4 as the head of youth programming. And guess what he did? He phoned up all these blokes and said, do you want to come and make some shows for Channel 4? Because we've got a whole youth thing. So they made the comic strip. So when Jeremy Isaacs did his big announcement of the first night of Channel 4, what was right there in the middle? Five Go Mad endorse it. And my bosses are sitting there, hang on, Nigel Planer, Dawn...
Same cards. Yes.
Aren't they the people in that pilot, Paul? And I literally got called in by Jim Moyer, at that time it was Jim Moyer, and he said, could you get a series made before Channel 4 opens in November? And that's the only reason we got on. And the fact is, they went on
I
first.
think we must have commissioned the other scripts like we did the pilot,
And
then
then
you
the commissioned
the other
scripts,
script.
yeah, because you wouldn't have
So
been able to do it
yeah.
in time.
Also, the
'cause we were in Australia when we were
famous
writing the
5
scripts.
series wasn't... It was only that
It was a one-off.
They only got that one-off ready
So we got the series.
for the opening night of Channel 4, and then there was a gap before the rest of the comic strips went out.
Well, we went out the week after it opened.
That's right,
But
that's
we
right.
had 6, and then you had one.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was 5 days after.
5
yeah.
days after.
So we were in competition with ourselves, weren't we?
It's a good place to be.
But it's the only reason it got made. There's
But it
no way.
wouldn't have happened in the system today. where
And you
there's
couldn't,
sort
no,
of
it wouldn't get made today.
committees, and you have to have 3 ticks and everything. And Paul, as a producer, had the power to go, I am going to make a pilot, which would just never
Again, you wouldn't have
happen.
that part.
No.
And also he was showing it to people like John Lloyd, who was doing Not the 9 O'Clock News, who was going, I've heard that these people are quite good, but this looks like a load of shit to me.
It really was. I couldn't understand, because I'd read this script and I thought, this is fucking brilliant. This is just, I loved it. I don't know how we're going to do it, but it's fantastic. And then I showed it to other people, and they just didn't get it at all. They really didn't. And I was lucky to assemble a very good crew, because I was working on the 2 Ronnies at the time, so I got the best visual effects, the best lighting, the best sound. These people all did the big entertainment shows, but they came to the first rehearsal. They all come to a big tech run about 2 days before you do the studio. You go through it, and the cast all went off for lunch, and it was silence in the room. And they were friendly, they said, Paul, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, what's this? But within the first couple of episodes, they were like, oh, come on, this is so good. And they kept coming in saying, I could give you this light, Paul, and I could build this for you.
Once you hear the laughter,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, the
Because it was
laughter was
going
extraordinary.
live, and you get that first studio audience in,
Amazing.
and once people hear, oh, I see, it's funny, It's
people started coming
it's
down
like
to
a
the studio,
germ, isn't it?
it?
It's like a virus. Laughter sets off
also
other laughter. And
had the terrible idea to try and do it without a studio audience. Which,
Yes.
who
which
had
I
that
think,
idea?
I think everyone goes through
I
that
didn't.
phase, don't they?
I didn't,
So
no.
Paul went, okay, we'll record the dress rehearsal. And,
To keep them quiet, I
and we
said,
all
okay,
looked
we'll
at it
record
and
the
thought,
dress.
No,
No,
terrible
we need
idea.
a live
And after
Gotta
about
have
3
one,
minutes of
yeah.
laughter engulfing them,
Yeah.
they all said, I think we'll do it with an audience.
And they were all live performers. They weren't
They were live
screen performers.
Yeah.
And so they did these.
But it's
actually
also
were
the way it's
performed-
written, though,
yeah.
as well. You know, we were doing the comic strip at the same time with single camera. That's a different type of comedy. You don't want the live audience there. But for something like this, there's no other way of doing
It
it.
was amazing to be in that studio, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing to be in that
I can
studio.
still hear Rick's brother's got a very distinctive
Yes,
laugh.
and,
And you
yeah.
hear it on every single episode. I think we were surprised by who it was popular with. We thought it would be sort of, parents of students seeing how, terrible students were. But it was school kids and policemen.
Yeah.
That was our big area.
And a lot of bands watched it on
Yeah.
the tour bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because videos were new on tour buses.
Yes, videos were new, which is why we did the whole flash frame thing in the second season.
I don't know, I might have made this up, but you were somewhere and all these skinheads started shouting at you, kill the hippie, and you got really frightened. And I said, Nigel, it's the show. I may have made that up.
Yeah, no, I have had it over the years. Yes, I had.
But you didn't know at first it was because of the young ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I had people throwing snowballs at me and just generally thinking it's all right to attack me.
I remember we went, after the first transmission, we all went for a meal, I can't remember where, Clapham Common or somewhere like that. We watched it at my house, and then we
I
all
remember that,
we all
yeah.
went for a meal afterwards. And what we said to each other at the time was, look, if it works or it doesn't work, what's up there is what we intended it. Each of us are at different levels.
Yeah, yeah.
The writers, the performers, me produce. That if it doesn't work, then it's not our fault, if you like. I mean, the audience don't like it. That's fine. But what we've put up there is what we set out to put up there. So if they
Also,
like
there's a thing which you don't get so much nowadays, because everything you can watch whenever you like, whatever you want. But there's a thing, even though you're not in an audience with people, when something's actually being broadcast at that moment, that you could have seen the edit 10 times, but you know that there's however many thousands of people watching it, and there's a sudden realization of what it is you've made. Well, wasn't that many million to begin with, was it?
about 2.5.
2.5.
Did about
yeah.
2.5 from the beginning.
Well, but you think, even before you know what the rating is, the actual thing of something's going out now, and that's when you're likely to see the biggest mistake you've made,
Yeah,
because you can watch an edit.
Yeah.
We'd had
Yeah.
that once, and
Yeah.
you watch the edit again and again and again and again. You show it to people. How many times you've copy-edited, as it were. The moment it goes out and you know other people are watching, you think, oh, why is that? The cousin character, that's wrong. We made a mistake there.
In those days, the action of watching it live transmitted was very different than it is now.
Yeah.
Because that was the moment it
You
was
knew
born.
it was a shared
Yeah.
experience, and shows still, they call it the water cooler moment, don't
Yes,
they?
the next morning.
Shows were very much, that's what everybody was looking for.
There's a funny bit of audience reaction, which I'm only telling you because it was in one of the episodes you've just seen. When Jim Barclay comes up to the bloke at the door and he's got the black gloves on and he says, stealing white man's electricity, yeah? And I always remember, we got lots of letters in the office, which again, we didn't show many of them to these guys, but we got lots of complaints and lots of praise as well. But I got a letter which I've always remembered from a woman who said, I'm writing to you as a mother of a teenage school-age kid, and I just want to ask you to be, I'm not doing the normal, disgusted of Tunbridge Wells, but I just want to say to you that my child was almost for the first time in his school career, has felt involved in something. And he was going into school and they were all quoting lines, and he's really been part of something until you put out that thing where the policeman said, black man's electricity, because we're a black family, and that's all they say to him now. When he comes in, they say, oh, touching black man's electricity, oh, using black man's
White
chalk.
man's electricity.
White man's electricity. And it was really, because what can you say to that? I mean, what I could... I
We
don't know,
were going, but it's ironic.
well, I did. I spoke to you and Rick about it, didn't I? And we wrote the nicest letter we could, but it's the worst audience letter I've ever had to deal with, because normally it's, how dare you, and you write back and say, fuck off. But with that one, I was really upset.
Because I didn't write that. The one is there, can I use your lavatory? No. That's why I pissed in your garden, that one.
That's the thing, though. You get. I've just been on tour with Adrian, and there was people coming up to us, saying, "It was John," or you know. And I can't. What you just said. Are you ready, clocks? Does that come from the young ones?
Yeah.
Are
I
you
mean,
ready,
me.
Clocks? Yes, just for the
It was-
Billy Bolofsky.
It was
Yeah.
35 years ago. And
I remember all your lines.
Lexi, he had trouble remembering them at the time, so
But it didn't take long either. In terms of, it wasn't a long-running series. We did 12 episodes 35 years ago, so it's not that easy to remember.
But
all
you
of
get
that.
quoted in Catalan now. You go to Barcelona,
Yeah.
you shout at him in the
Neil
street
is
in
a folk
Catalan.
hero in
Yeah, it's
Catalonia.
Nil is very big news in Catalonia. I went to a do like this, and they were saying in Catalan, Neil is not a very Catalan name, but hands up how many people in the audience are called Nil because of El Joves, which is the young ones, El Joves. And like 20 hands go up, and a woman holds up a baby.
And at the same time, after the young ones went out in Britain, Neil dropped out of the name of babies, and no babies are called Neil anymore.
No babies are called Neil. Well,
What is-
that's a good thing, though,
What
isn't
is
it? It's a
Hey
terrible
Guys
name.
heavy
I
in
think.
Catalan?
Sorry?
Hey guys heavy or
Oh yeah, no. I had to learn all the Neil stuff in Catalan, but in the voice of the guy who dubbed me, because otherwise they don't. If I go like that, they don't know what I'm doing. But if I go Potserus Malaria Casming Maurice or Mal Karma, you can imagine what that is. Mal Karma un altre cop. That means bad karma again. So it's quite fun.
At the risk of opening up old wounds, would you just like to talk a little about Oh No, Not Them?
Oh no, not them! Yeah, yeah. They made it. They bought the. There's not a wound for me, but
Mary Tyler Moore's company?
was it?
It was Mary Tyler Moore's company.
They bought the format rights. Taffner, that was it. Yeah, they bought the format rights. Kept the
In America, this is, yeah?
This is America. Yeah, Los Angeles. I went to Los Angeles, made a pilot.
Does that pilot exist? Because I looked for it on
I've
YouTube
got it.
and I couldn't find
You
it.
got
I
it,
can get you a
Nigel? Have
copy
you got
of it.
it?
Yeah, I've got
Seriously,
it somewhere.
can I?
Yeah.
No, I had it and I lost it in a move. I really wanted.
No, I've got it somewhere. I've got it on DVD.
The guy who plays Mike can't be, but it looks exactly like Jim Carrey. It looks like a very
He does,
young
doesn't
Jim
he?
Carrey.
Will Bundy.
And they
Rob Bundy.
decided that
Rob Bundy.
Rob Bundy.
they
Yeah.
decided the character they could do without was
Was Rick, yeah. Rick's character's cut.
Rick went. They couldn't
And-
find a Neil, so Nigel was.
They couldn't find a Neil. Also, I think they felt the English stereotypical character they could do with is like a Dick Van Dyke Cockney or a hippie, an English hippie was the Americans would understand, so they kept me. And I went there and did it. It was called Oh No, Not Them.
They phoned me up after when they were doing it, and they said, I can't remember the head writer or whoever it was, phoned me up and said, Paul, we've got a real problem with this because who are you supposed to like? And I said, none of them. They're all four, completely.
That's the idea.
No,
Yeah.
but you have to have somebody, you have to have
Yeah.
somebody. Who's the least unlikable? And I said, well, probably Neil. So they made you into quite
Oh, so
a-
I was
Yes.
meant to be likeable.
Yes, yeah. Who's the least unlikable? I said, well, Neil,
Right.
maybe.
So thanks, you dropped me in it and
Yeah,
got
so
me that
then they
job.
made him all soft and nice. Yeah.
Right. Well, no, it was pretty much.
You had the hands,
character was
didn't
the
you? I
same.
remember
Did the
that.
arms gag,
Did the
yeah.
arms gag, yeah.
But it didn't work because not for the reasons you'd expect. It didn't work because Dave Merkin, who used to write and produce Bob Newhart's show, then after this pilot went on to write and produce The Simpsons, was such a British comedy fan that he didn't Americanify it enough. He should, because what they're good at is having lots of gags coming out.
yeah.
That's what they know how to do. They don't know how to do something like us, like a subversive type show. with no likable people in it. And so he tried to sort of show how English he could be, and it doesn't really work because it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
and it's a shame, but the amazing thing about it, Oh No, Not Them, is the title sequence, because the music was by Danny Elfman, who wrote the theme, who wrote Beetlejuice, but also wrote famously the theme for The Simpsons. And that opening sequence of The Simpsons, where they're all travelling in, gradually get in the car, end up on the sofa. That is the opening sequence of Oh No, Not Them, with little claymation models of Neil, Mike and Vivian going, and they end up on the sofa. It's really good.
Well,
I mean, the rest of the show is pretty bad. but
yeah, it was sad, wasn't it? Because we thought we might all make some money from that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, now, if it'd been made 10 years ago, which obviously it couldn't have been, but people in the States would be aware of it. But didn't the BBC sell it to MTV for like 35 quid, and they kind of...
Yes,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was on every Sunday night for years,
We
wasn't
suddenly all started getting phone calls from American friends saying, "Oh, it's fantastic, that show." And it's on every night.
But it was also that it was before cable or anything non-terrestrial existed. So
MTV was...
in the deal, they didn't...
Oh, right.
That's right.
They didn't have to
you're
pay
right.
for the programme.
So they sold it
As a promo, as
for
a band
300
promo.
quid
Yeah.
for unlimited use.
MTV put it on because of the bands, to be honest. And what did we get? Honestly, about
I got
£1.50.
80
80 quid, was it?
1.8.
180, yeah.
Yeah, no,
18
18, yeah. It was.
I got about £1.50. I mean, it was literally...
and it
came
was
a
on
check
for
from them.
years, wasn't it? On a Sunday
It ran
night.
for years and years and years.
When, as you say, I mean, they can do those format sales and pull them off quite successfully, like with The Office. But when they get it wrong, it can be a disaster.
Well,
They did a Fawlty Towers where they got rid of the Basil character.
Yeah, they got rid of Basil Character.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, they did Red Dwarf, and that they
Yeah.
totally screwed that up.
Bob Newhart did what?
The remake of Fawlty Towers.
Did Bob Newhart
I think
play
it was
that?
called-
No, that was... I mean,
it
that
was
was
called
set
No
now.
Soap Radio, and it was like a remake.
Yeah,
of
that's
Fawlty
right. No,
Towers.
so radio was used a lot of it. And there was a question down the front here, please.
I mean, Bob Newhart's a brilliant comic, but anything further from the young
But he
ones...
he was a cuddly John.
He's a sort of smart guy.
See, because you've got to like them. You can't not like
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Well, that's what they did with The Office. Well, just on this thing, is that writer, I can't remember his name, when they did the first season of The Office, the American version, he wrote quite a big piece about it. He said, we realised we weren't going to have a series that we could develop, so we decided to make that main Brent character nice. And we tried to get some sympathy for him. So there's an episode that this guy wrote where they give him a present at the end, and it turns out that they tell him, yeah, we did mean to give you the present, or some, typical American sort of, let's make it a bit sappy. And it goes on for, 10 years.
Well, look, guys,
they do know what
nice
they're doing.
people. I mean, look at the politics over there at the moment. They're nice people.
You'd be surprised by how little media coverage there was.
Yeah.
There wasn't really any, weren't really TV reviews, at least not for comedy. Clive James was the first person who started even writing about television.
Wasn't reviewed at all or
and he
mentioned.
started writing about Dallas and things. I think we were on Points of View once, and
To be complained
Yeah.
about.
Remember that.
That's it, Larry McMenemy.
That's right.
It's hurtful.
Yes, you don't remember.
He was an ex-guardsman who managed Sunderland FC, wasn't he? He said, that comedy, he was from the north, he said, comedy, it's hurtful. It's hurtful comedy.
He was upset about the Oblivion Boys doing that Pope line.
Oh, right, because he was a Catholic.
Most the critics didn't bother with us. The
Yeah.
management of the BBC were embarrassed by us.
We didn't have any. We had said we don't want to have it trailed and have lots of publicity. We just want it to look like it's turned up by accident on BBC Two.
They were
and
very
people
happy
have-
not to trail
have
it.
Well,
discovered
what was the maximum viewing figures? Would be, what, 6?
3?
I think it went up to 5 to
Did
7.
it go to 5 in the
Five.
end?
I think in the end,
Second
like
series,
second
yeah.
series, yeah, it was like, I
Then
think
the
it's
second
5 or 6.
series,
Yeah.
then we won the BAFTA completely out of the blue. Nobody expected that. We were nominated for it, but I said to the guys, we're not going to win. There's
Well,
no
and
way.
they didn't, invite any of us.
I wasn't
They
there.
didn't invite us
To the
they didn't invite
BAFTAs.
any of you to the BAFTAs,
No.
did they?
Well, that's not surprising with the BBC.
Well, they had, by the way, ruined the big BBC Christmas party about 6 months earlier. They literally got in and trashed the place.
there were.
I'd say Adrian Edmondson and Roland Riveron.
Aidan Roland.
It wasn't us,
They had a
yes.
couple.
I don't know, because, you can still, because it was that, it was Roland showed his penis to
Yes,
Mrs.
Roland got his dick
Valdunica.
out. Roland. Every year,
Among
Bill
other
Cotton,
things.
the entertainment department was run by a legendary man called Bill Cotton, later Sir Bill Cotton, and he had this massive Christmas party every year where literally everybody, Morgan Wise, Tommy Cooper, Dave Allen, the two Ronnies, it was black tie, and
It was very exciting. I was so
And you would
chuffed to
see
be
it.
there
it was amazing.
and meet, the two Ronnies,
two Ronnies, yeah.
meet all these.
Penelope Keith.
Who said,
Yeah.
Ronnie Barker said, yeah, I quite like Stephen Fry, but I don't like your stuff.
To Ben, yes, he said that to Ben, yeah.
I was Arthur Askey, do you remember? I was buzzing a little bit. He said there's a Liverpool comic, Alexei Sayle. He said, "Oh yeah, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I talk about politics, but it's kind of postmodern kind of analysis." And he just kind of walked off.
Anyway, I said to Jim Wyatt, "You've got to ask them. It's you recommissioned it, really." So we asked the writers, the four of you, Alexei and Lisa and Ben, and it did kick off a bit. And Roland at one point did get his dick out. And
I took Roland as my +1, and I actually got a letter from them saying never bring.
that's
him
right.
to
You
the
did that.
BBC."
I was wondering why Roland was there. You took him as your +1.
Yeah. I thought everybody took the knobs out except me.
No.
There was,
And there were several ashtrays missing afterwards, and cigarette boxes went
Stole a
missing.
painting, didn't he?
Did he?
no, that was Roland again.
Oh, that was Roland.
Adrian got his knob out just as the lift doors were shut.
Yes, that's right. And we weren't asked about the second. We weren't.
No.
Well, we weren't asked the second time, were we? No, we weren't asked again.
Well, on that note, Paul has mentioned that he will be back December the 8th. We're showing even earlier the TV manifestations of the alternative comedy on a night we called Cunningly Alternative Comedy. Be great if you want to come along to that. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank my panel so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.